We have Dr. Bonilla, Amity Hall, and there is another person joining us soon. But knowing that it does work for a group but not others, sometimes we do have conversations with the physicians and then advise them over the phone as long as the physician is present. Yep.
Can I get a question there?
Sure. One last question.
Thank you. My name is Eric Johnson. I'm an Incline Village survivor and an original prototype for the Holmes chronic fatigue syndrome. And I noticed straight off that all the clusters were occurring in sick buildings. In fact, every cluster I encountered and every individual patient that I approached had some kind of connection with the sick building. And we actually asked the CDC about it at the time. Of course, they weren't interested. But I chased it down and I found out that all the buildings had toxic mold. This was definitely a factor in the syndrome. But I've been told since then that I have no proof. Now, my question is, as a prototype for the syndrome with direct documented evidence from the original clusters investigated by the CDC, I felt that I have a right to have this investigated. So I was just wondering, what constitutes a relevant clue that warrants attention from the research community?
What level of evidence should trigger a legitimate investigation into something, more or less?
Well, we did have the sick building syndrome, the sick buildings investigated, and the finding of toxic mold was confirmed. The problem was that at the time, it hadn't been discovered yet and wasn't entered into the literature. So when Dr. Cheney and Dr. Peterson looked into it, they found no reason to suspect toxic mold as a factor. So in order to take this into account, we would have to revisit these events and take a look at whatever role it might have played.
So, what about...
Are there any environmental scientists from public health school? That's one thing I would ask. I will say that for, it's not my area in health services, but environmental factors are hard to analyze because we're all exposed to so many things. And to narrow it down to one factor is very difficult if you're talking about a population. Now, if you're talking about an individual patient, then there's nothing to say you can't go and experiment and go somewhere else for a few weeks. Or, you saw the movie, she went for a more radical way. But, you could see if that makes a difference in your health.
And I'm the person who turned Jen Brea onto mobile weights. So she did find it to be worth pursuing in the case.
And that's going to be an individual decision. But on a studies level, it's very difficult.
I think that every clue has to be taken seriously, and without forgetting that we need to apply the scientific method and rigor so that we set an example. I think that by studying the way we are doing CFS, there will be other, or ME-CFS, disciplines and other diseases that are going to benefit. But we need to maintain the scientific rigor and the scientific method.
We plan to undertake a study for that. I've talked to you about that too. I think we need to figure out what organism or organisms are responsible, and also then what do they produce. And one of the problems is these mycotoxins, which is what you're referring to, are really toxic. And aflatoxin is the most potent mutagen of any compound known. And they work at very low concentrations. And I'm sure what the molds produce these as a defense mechanism, and because they'll kill off anything. And the technology for measuring their concentration is really not there. And that's one of the technical problems. There are labs which will test it for you, but they're called they're on the quack watch. They're actually below the detection limit of the technology they're using. However, there's new technology out there. That's what we do, and we've increased the sensitivity by 10,000-fold, and we could be able to develop an assay for it. So that is in the plans. It's going to be a long time when we have to be careful not to spend too much money on it. because it will take time to actually put that all together. But I do plan to do it.